In 1040, Harthacnut, son of King Canute, finally took the English crown that had been denied to him over the previous 5 years by a combination of the political situation in his kingdom of Denmark and the machinations of Harthacnut's half-brother Harold Harefoot, who used Harthacnut's extended absence to make himself King of England. Harthacnut's reign over England would be short and rather unremarkable. His first problem was to ensure the loyalty of his nobles, most prominent amongst them Earl Godwin. Godwin, despite a previous loyalty to Harthacnut, had switched sides and became Harold Harefoot's man. This new alliance led to the infamous murder of Alfred, Harthacnut's half-brother, in 1036. Harthacnut was outraged at the death of Alfred and would not forgive the Earl easily. Godwin was acutely aware of this, but he knew the way to Harthacnut's heart: bribery. Godwin gave the king a magnificent ship with an 80-man strong crew, which must have been symbolically important for Harthacnut. He knew Godwin wielded enormous power and influence, but this was a gesture of submission which would have done much to ease any fears Harthacnut had of Godwin plotting against him. On top of this expensive gift, Godwin also swore an oath of loyalty to the king. On the surface, it looked as though Harthacnut had dealt with a potentially difficult problem early on in his reign, but the king nonetheless seems to have remained in something of a paranoid state. Harthacnut wanted not only the loyalty of his leading nobles, but of everybody living under his rule. He sent armed men marching across England, demanding financial tribute from his subjects, but naturally enough, this didn't go down at all well. In May 1041, a fight broke out in Worcester, where the king had sent his tax collectors. On the officials' arrival in Worcester, the people there flew into a rage, and Feeder and Thurston, two of the collectors, were forced to seek refuge in a tower. The rebels would have been well-minded to have considered their job of sending a message to the king done there and then, but they wanted blood. On the 4th of May, Feeder and Thurston were put to the sword. Harthacnut was irate and perhaps fearful at the same time. This was exactly the sort of disloyalty he had been expecting, and he must now re-establish his royal authority. Despite the king's anger, his response to the murders took a long time to come. A royal army led by Earl Godwin only arrived in Worcester in November of 1041. According to the chronicler Florence of Worcester, the king's army pillaged and burned Worcester over a period of 4 days, although the chronicler also says that there were very few casualties. This fortunate turn of events came about as Worcester's citizens had been forewarned of the king's advance, and they were able to find a good spot to barricade themselves in from the royal army, and eventually they would extract peace terms with Harthacnut's men. Florence of Worcester adds that Harthacnut ordered his army to put all the inhabitants of Worcester they could find to the sword, but was this really the case? It had, after all, taken 6 months for Harthacnut's army to march on Worcester, and surely the king's wrath must have been somewhat cooled in that time. Perhaps the escape of Worcester's inhabitants had been allowed by Harthacnut, and he too simply wanted to send his people a clear message of his royal authority, whilst targeting only a few of the main troublemakers. This is merely me speculating, but Harthacnut would have been better served in dealing with the situation with a cooler head and should have avoided sacking Worcester altogether. Not long after the sack of Worcester, Harthacnut welcomed his half-brother Edward back to England. This half-brother is better known to history as Edward the Confessor, and he would soon succeed Harthacnut as King of England. Edward was greeted with considerable warmth by Harthacnut, and he would remain at the royal court for the final months of Harthacnut's reign. Harthacnut was clearly loyal to his family. The death of Alfred had horrified him, causing him to have Harold Harefoot, Alfred's murderer, dug up and thrown in the River Thames. He thought much of Edward, and certainly he held his mother Emma in high regard. Harthacnut had Viking blood in him, yes, but he also showed that men born of that particular stock were more complex than their fierce outward demeanour may have indicated. But Harthacnut's death was certainly one of a true Viking. It came in 1042, where Harthacnut was attending a wedding involving two powerful families at Lambeth. The celebrations were in full swing, and the king himself was with the bride and some others, when suddenly he fell to the ground with a terrible crash. He had been drinking heavily, which, of absolutely no doubt whatsoever, was the instigator of the king's final illness. Harthacnut didn't die straight away. Instead, he remained speechless until he died on the 8th of June. Given the small snippets of information on Harthacnut's death, we can deduce he died of a stroke.